everyone. And I want to welcome us all here in a particular way. And as I'm speaking, I really want to invite you to take a look at the faces of the people who are here in this session so that we can start to connect with each other as we spend this evening together. And I want to welcome all of the ways in which you define your identity and all of the experiences of identity that have been assigned to you in the world. And a welcome to you no matter how you define yourself in terms of sex, gender, skin color, sexuality, class, age, or religion. And welcome to your abilities, your skills, your bodies, and to all of your emotions. And welcome if you're someone who feels comfortable in groups, and also welcome if you don't. Welcome if you've never facilitated a meeting before, and welcome if you already have some experience of that. And welcome this evening if your energy's high right now, and welcome if it's low or if you feel a bit sleepy. Whatever your experience of being here right now is, then it's very welcome here. I just want to welcome all of our identities and the diversity that we bring here together, our experiences and our identities. So thank you. Really great to see you all here.
Thanks, Catherine. So, I'd like to do some just quick Zoom checks because I think some people might be more familiar than others. Is there anyone who's coming in from a phone? I don't think so. I think everyone might be on a computer. Great. And I've popped the link for the slides in the chat. Can you just do me a thumbs up if you can access those slides? Great, so smooth. And little temperature check. If you feel really familiar with Zoom and you know how to do everything, could you pop your hand at the top of your screen? And if you feel completely bemused by Zoom and you've never been here before, you could put it on the bottom and anything in between.
Hi.
Great. There's a bouncy learning zone in the middle. Great, thank you. So I think we've all now found the chat. If you have any technical trouble with Zoom, pop a message in the chat and you can send it to everyone. James, have you got access to the chat? I think everyone else was here. You've got it, cool. You can send it to everyone, or you can send it privately to Anais, who's on tech, or you can send Catherine and me private messages as well. If one of us is sort of facilitating or presenting when you're sending the message, there's a chance we won't instantly see it, but we'll be looking often. So if you've got any questions, you can pop them in the chat. And you can also come off mute and just talk to us. We're a really nice small group, so please do that as well. And yeah, if you would like, if it's important to you that we use the right pronouns for you, I welcome you to put them next to your name, as Catherine and I have done. And I'll say a little bit more about that. You can do that by hovering over your picture and clicking on the 3 dots. And then there's an option to rename yourself. And just to say a little bit about pronouns, because I think for some people that's very familiar and for others it's not so familiar. The reason we ask that is that we make a lot of assumptions about each other based on the way we look or the way we perceive each other to look. And if we make the wrong assumption about someone and use pronouns, so when I say pronouns, I'm meaning she, her, they, them, he, him, and there are other pronouns as well. It can be it can make that person feel very invisible and unseen. So if that's important to you, feel free to put your pronouns next to your name. And if not, that's completely fine as well. And you can just leave your name as it is. Just thinking about time and check-in. Maybe in the chat still. It would be great to just hear a few words from everyone by way of introduction. So if you would be willing, please could you pop in the chat maybe the organization that you're coming from, and 3 words that you'd like to share about how you're doing right now. And that might be how you're feeling, or it might be something that you're bringing with you from your day. Any 3 words to describe how you're doing right now. So inviting you to pop that in the chat, and I'll just read them out as they come, so we get a bit of a sense of where everyone is at as we start together. I'm going to do it too. And just give us a few minutes to do that. Great. So Jules is saying Watlington, CAG, trees, CAG, feeling fine. Nice, thank you. I have to read them faster than that, won't I? I'm saying I'm from Navigate, open, curious, little tired. Catherine's from Navigate, interested, energized, relaxed. Anais is with CAG, curious, headache, excited, question mark, exclamation mark. James is from Earthwatch Europe, working on Naturehood project, ready for Friday. I hear you, James. Nina, Good Feed Oxford, fatigued, tender, surprisingly warm, great. Katie, architect from Transition by Design, interested, hello weekend. And Inez, am I pronouncing it right, Inez?
Inesh.
Inesh, thank you. Inesh from Broken Spoke Bike Co-op, excited, tired, hungry, beautiful. Thank you. Welcoming everything that you're coming with, all the ready for the weekend, and the curious and the excited and the fatigued and the all of it. Welcome, welcome. So last thing I'm going to say for now is to invite you to have a look at slide 2, where there is an overview of the session. So we are talking about facilitation today, and these are the things we're going to touch on. We're going to look at how Catherine and I define the role of the facilitator. We'll look at the flow of the meeting, so kind of the elements that you might find in a meeting or might want to have in a meeting, and some tools that you can use as the facilitator, particularly tools that can really help you hear a lot more voices. We'll look at the key skill of feelings, needs, and sort of deep listening and reflecting back, which we think is really key to facilitating. We'll have a look at things that the facilitator might want to track or keep an eye on, including something called open loops, which Catherine will talk more about later. We'll look at something called naming and framing, which is my current favourite facilitation tool. We'll say more about that later. And we'll look at managing contributions. So again, how to try and get a balance of voices in the meeting and make space for people who aren't speaking so much. And then we'll close together and we'll point you to some resources. We'll ask you to have a think about your next steps, ask you to evaluate the session and then check out together. And yeah, I was just wanting to point to that we're touching on a few key principles and skills and tools, and this is very much a beginning. So please don't feel like you have to master everything or understand everything. These are things that you could start being aware of and looking out for in your facilitation practice. And they might be more familiar to some of you than to others. And then at the end, we'll ask you about your kind of key takeaways and what one next step might be. So this is stuff that you can kind of bring in very slowly. You don't have to understand it all straight away. Cool. I'm going to pass to Catherine.
Great. So we just want to spend a little bit of time for you to reflect in pairs on what you want to learn and about your facilitation, and really think about why you're here at this session. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you into pairs. And is it okay for you? Were you happy to be in a pair? Okay, great. Ross will make the breakout groups and I'll put the questions into the chat. And they come in the form of what are called open sentences. So it says, for example, I want to learn more about facilitation because, and then you complete the sentence. And there are 4 sentences for each person. You have about 4 minutes to speak about those, or some of those, whichever ones of those appeal to you most. And then we'll switch and the other person will speak. So one person goes through all 4 of the sentences and responds to them, and then we switch, and we'll give you a time warning about when you're about halfway through your time. It's about 4 minutes for each person. I'm going to put the questions into the chat now. Can everybody see the questions there? And then we'll go into breakout groups. Is any questions that anybody has about what I'm inviting you to do? Okay, so yeah, enjoy meeting each other and checking in with each other.
So you should be seeing an invite on your screens now. I think people have it.
Great. 43 after 4 minutes. So 43 plus 4, 47. At 47, they have a halfway time warning.
Thank you. Made it to the other side.
One person.
We've lost.
Inesh.
Yeah, we've lost.
She was with me. I don't know where she is now. Gone into the.
Maybe dropped out.
It's like disapparating. Suddenly you end up somewhere else accidentally.
Gone into the 3rd room.
If this isn't too, if this isn't a question you want to answer, that's fine. But I just had a curiosity because neither Ros nor I were been party to those conversations. Just like we're doing a temperature check. Well, what's your sense of done quite a bit of facilitation before, done absolutely none? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, we'll hand over to Ros.
Thank you. Okay, so take a look at slide 3. We're going to have a quick think together about what is facilitation, and then given the definition that Catherine and I use, what's important for a facilitator to be looking out for. So on slide 3, you can see at the top our definition of facilitation: to make easier, to help move forward an action or a process. And yeah, underneath we've written, the role of the facilitator is to support the group to achieve its purpose, the task, with care for everyone in the group, and the facilitator holds the process so that the rest of the group can think about the task. So for us, the facilitator isn't there to make decisions or find the solutions. The facilitator is there to find the way that will help the group to make their own decisions for themselves. Yeah, quite key to how we think about facilitation. So I'm curious, if you think about either meetings that you've facilitated or meetings that you've been in that you thought were either really brilliant or didn't go so well in some way, what feels important to you for the facilitator to be really paying attention to? And I would love to hear some voices, actually, if you're willing to just come off mute and shout out ideas. Inesh, are you come off mute?
Oh,
you needn't.
I came off mute like a bit too early. I hadn't thought about what I was going to say yet.
Sure. Have a think. What's important for a facilitator to look out for, or what's important about the job, the role?
Maybe staying on topic.
Thank you. Yeah, great. So staying on topic. Thanks, James. Definitely. What else? Thank you.
to have an idea of what's supposed to be decided, like what the scope of a decision or an outcome of the meeting can be to work towards?
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, so like how far the decision reaches and maybe who can make the decision, like what the exactly, yeah, perfect, thanks Nina. Great, what else?
Can't remember.
Being aware of being aware of like everyone's needs and feelings within the meeting.
Thank you. So tending to the needs and feelings. Thank you. And Jules, were you going to say something as well?
I just remember what it was. It was just to pay attention to who wants to speak and and whether there's someone that's been cut off, or being aware of the running order, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you. So really keeping an eye on who's wanting to speak. Katie is wanting to speak.
Yeah, good spot. Making sure that everyone feels listened to and heard.
Thank you. Yeah, super important. Thank you.
Time?
Any last ones? Yes, great. Yeah, the time, tending to the time of the agreed timings of the meeting. Thank you, Anais. Any last ones? I think we've got loads of them actually that I'm going to uncover on this slide. Cool. Okay, so the big reveal on slide 3. So yeah, we find it really helpful to think about these kind of 3 major things. The purpose, so what do we need to achieve in this meeting? And that can really be the guiding star for the facilitator. I find it a really helpful question. If you get a bit lost or you're like, I don't know how to help us move forward, if you take yourself back to what is the purpose of the meeting and how can I best have us take a step towards the purpose? And particularly if you've agreed that as a group at the beginning, so the facilitators maybe checked, I understand the purpose of this meeting to be this. Are we agreed on that? And then throughout the meeting, you can, because you've all agreed it, you can use that to help explain to the group why you're making the decisions that you're making. So our guiding star is the purpose. And then the process, how we try and get to the purpose. And we'll talk a bit later about sort of tools that can be helpful in the process. And depending on what we choose with the process, we might be able to include more or fewer voices that's already been mentioned. And then there is relationship, tending to relationships. How do we care for everyone's needs? And the little blue boxes are a few other things to think about. So open loops, and I'm not going to say anything about open loops now. I think Catherine will say a bit more later on. But in its simplest form, an open loop is something that's kind of left hanging or undecided. And if it's not decided in any way, it can really sap energy from the group. And Catherine will say more about that later. Time, we've mentioned, Anais mentioned time. Energy, so how the room is doing. And I'm looking out for that particularly now, for example, when we're on Zoom, it's the end of the day and we're quite close to the weekend. So I'm like looking out for energy in the room. Trust, sensing how the group is feeling about you as a facilitator. If it's a group that you know really well and you feel like you've got a lot of trust, you might be able to do things, make process decisions that wouldn't make so much sense if the group didn't have a lot of trust in you or didn't know you well as the facilitator. The needs, Inesh mentioned tending to everyone's needs. And power. And power is really a whole massive thing, all of its own, that is an ongoing practice. And we won't be talking very much about power. Yeah, it's really a massive thing in its own right, but a lot of the tools that we'll talk about will be helpful in terms of thinking about power dynamics in the room and welcoming more voices. So those are some things to think about in terms of the definition of facilitation. And if you come down to the next slide, we'll have a quick think about the flow of the meeting. So what the elements of the meeting are. So I am inviting us as a whole group to just pop in ideas. So with one thing on each post-it note, I would like, to gather in the left-hand part, the kind of elements of the meeting, like what might the sections of the meeting be? And in the right-hand part, what tools could a facilitator use to help them? So an example of a tool, so for example, part of the meeting, Catherine and I have done we did an introduction. So we did kind of a bit of housekeeping and we did a check-in. So a check-in we might think of as a tool to help us connect at the beginning of the meeting. Or another example of a tool might be going into different sized groups so that people who feel more comfortable in a smaller group get a chance to participate. So have a little think and just pop in ideas. Let me know if you can't write into the post-its. You should see people writing in. Great. Have a couple of minutes to focus on that. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine reminding us that if you're coming to the session we're doing next week, we'll look at power in more detail then, a bit more detail. And I also invite you collaboratively to arrange these into some kind of order if you see an order. So for the elements of the meeting, feel free to start moving them into the box and setting an order and see what might be missing. Nice. Oh, we need some more, huh? Right. Last few minutes to be adding, and then we'll try and see what's missing, if anything's missing. What's AOB, may I ask?
Any other business?
Business, I guess.
Great, thanks. Does anyone else have any other clarifying questions about what's written here?
Oh, I do.
Thanks, Catherine.
I'm wondering what a Mentimeter is.
Ooh.
It's a tool for online polling where everyone uses a smartphone app, and then in real time the replies or the ratings show up on the main screen.
I've never seen that.
Thanks.
Oh, I don't put my hand up.
Jules, go for it.
We did one with a word cloud in Mentimeter. So you all, for example, put in your favourite biscuit or favourite cake, and then you they come up on the screen, just the words, so anonymously. So it's just quite fun, very nice.
Nice. Thanks, Jules. It's a nice example. Great. Anyone see anything missing? And Catherine, I'm asking you that question as well. Oh, we're still shifting stuff around. That's fine.
Yes, I'm wondering about breakout groups, working in small groups, pairs or threes or something like that for a tool that's useful in a meeting. Do I need to write it down now?
I've done it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Okay, so in the flow, we're getting there with an order. Nice. We've got check-ins and arrivals, introductions, maybe at the same time, depending, or like in the same place, depending on what kind of meeting it is and who's there. Deciding roles. So I'm thinking that's facilitator, minute taker. Agenda setting, previous minutes run through, breaks, and then coming somewhere later on, making decisions, appreciative checkout, and action tracking. That might come towards the end. Lovely. And tools, we've got an agenda, yes, assigning roles, polls, etc. Temperature checks, checking for consensus, questions, breakout groups, any other business, breaks, whiteboards. Lovely. Anyone want to add anything else? I was just thinking to add, oh, sorry, Catherine, are you going to say something?
I was. I was just thinking about something like a spectrum line. It's something we don't have here with us today, but so that you can ask people to place themselves it's a bit like the temperature check, but you could do it using a slide or on a whiteboard where people would place themselves along a line, whether they were supportive of something or not supportive of it, and then you can invite people who place themselves in different places to just speak. So it's a way of having a discussion, but it also involves some sense of movement. Obviously, if you're in this in a room together, then you do it actually physically in the room, and then that involves movement. But it's also possible to do it online as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Is it easier? It's easier to go that way than it is that way, though, isn't it? You're saying if you agree with something, or.
So I'm thinking, are you thinking about temperature check, Jules, when you,
I don't know the difference between the two then. So what's this one?
Catherine, would you?
I think the temperature, each person does a temperature check for themselves personally, and when they're on a spectrum line, then the people are in relationship to each other, and a conversation can happen between people who are in one place and another. So I might say, do you agree, let's very crudely, do you agree with this proposal that's being put forward or disagree? And then people might say, well, actually I agree with part of it, and they might be in a different place on the line, but a conversation can then happen more specifically about what's being disagreed or agreed with. So it's slightly different from a temperature check in that it's a discussion tool, not a decision-making tool. I mean, a temperature check is a decision-making tool either.
And if we were in person, you might ask people to stand. So you'd make the line in the room and ask people to stand at a point on the line. And you can do it in two directions. Or if you're online, you can do it on a slide. So you ask people to move a marker. In fact, I can get a slide for us and put it in. So you can get people to show where they stand, and then you kind of see the spectrum of the room in a different way and get to discuss, as Catherine said. Does that make more sense, Jules? Did that answer it?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, there's something else I haven't still quite answered, but because you can. I'm sure we've done it before. I'm sure where you use the temperature one as the kind of like where you are on the spectrum kind of thing as well. So I'll just have to unlearn that.
I know. I think they're like, it's using a very similar idea, and I think they're both they can both be really appropriate, sort of depending on the circumstance. Thank you. I've added in games as well. We didn't have games in there. Yeah, energy. We could raise the energy or bring the energy down, lower the energy depending, or like calm the energy depending on what game we choose. And another one that I was just thinking of is, as a kind of tool, is proposals. So if you've had a discussion, one way to sort of move towards the purpose might be to ask, so does anyone, hearing what we've heard about what's important to everyone in the group, have a proposal that meets all of those needs? So again, you're not kind of relying on you, the facilitator, to come up with all the answers. You can put it to the mind of the group if there are proposals that meet all the needs. Yeah. Cool. Any last ones to add before we move on? Or any questions about anything that's come so far? Jules, yes, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you'll niggle to have.
No.
Really sorry. Is there any specific way, like, I'm just thinking about being left-handed. If there, you know, is there any, is it you just mirror whatever side on, you know what I mean?
On the spectrum line. Yeah. Catherine, are you envisaging particular ways to do it on Zoom? I think that's there's a confusion. There can be a confusion because this is a tool that we often use in person, and it's a bit different on Zoom. Were you thinking of anything specific, Catherine?
In terms of a particular thing to use it for, is that what you mean?
More like how to represent it. Do you know what, Jules? I'm going to put in a slide so you can see what it would look like on a slide.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And really, Jules, really thank you for the question. If you're asking the question, I'm sure that there are other people in the room who have got the same question. So really, thank you. I really welcome questions. Yeah. Any more questions before we move on? Okay. So just realizing how dark it's got, I'm wondering if I need to turn my light on maybe in a bit. So we're going to, like, bearing all of that in mind, we're going to move on to talking about the key skill that I mentioned. Yes, I can. Thanks, Catherine. Catherine's just asking me to make her host so she can do things. Just going to do that now. Great. So we're going to move on to this key skill, listening for something in particular. So listening for feelings and needs, and then reflecting that back to the person that you're listening to. And for us, this is a skill that is ongoing, that we're both still practicing, that we're always practicing, and that I use every day in my personal relationships and all the time as a facilitator. So take a look at slide 5. So I'm just going to say a little bit about this, and then I'm going to ask if there are any questions or comments, and then we'll go into a breakout room in pairs and have a practice with this. So when we are listening to someone in our personal lives or in a meeting, and maybe particularly if there might be some tension or a difference of opinion in the meeting, we could be listening on a few different levels. So this model looks at the head, the heart, and the feet as a way of thinking about how we could be listening. So we might be listening at the head level, where we'd be listening for thoughts, facts, concepts, arguments, ideas, and it could be really important to hear someone on this level and reflect back what you've heard from them. We could also sort of drop down a level and listen to them in terms of feelings. So then we're really listening, not necessarily to the words, but listening for what feelings they're having, what emotions, what mood they're in. So for example, are they feeling frightened or shocked or joyful or angry or calm? And on the slide, there's a link there which takes you to a list of feelings, which comes from a theory called, or a practice called nonviolent communication, NVC. I'm aware that this might be very familiar to some of you and maybe less familiar to others. So in nonviolent communication, there's an idea about us really sort of practicing to increase the vocabulary we have for talking about feelings, and that can really help us kind of understand ourselves better, and also help us to reflect to someone else in a way that really makes them feel heard. So that's the heart level, the feelings and emotions. And then there's the feet level, what's really important to them. So what's really motivating them. And we think in MVC, we think about that in terms of basic human needs. So things that all of us share together as needs. So on the head level, I might be saying, I want to do it this way. And I'm kind of talking about a strategy. And if we go down to the feet level, we might see what's really motivating me. And if that thing is met, then the strategy could change. The way we do that could change. So at the feet level, the needs might be things like connection, freedom, safety, contribution. So really things that all of us share as humans. And at the top of the slide, in listening, actually maybe I'll just pause there. Are there any questions, clarifying questions or comments so far? Do interrupt me if questions come up as I carry on. So on the top of the slide, there are just a few kind of other little pointers, and we're going to practice this in a moment. So when we're listening and when we're reflecting back what we've heard for the other person, the aim for us, the purpose, is to increase the connection between us, for the other person to really feel like, oh, they've really listened to what I'm saying and they've really understood me, and increase the connection. So we're listening deeply for what's behind what's being said, for the feelings and the needs and what's important to the person. And then we could offer a summary tentatively. So we're trying to allow the person to correct us if we've got something wrong. So we might use phrases like, are you feeling da 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 da? Is that right? Is X feeling really important to you right now? And trying to find sort of ways that feel natural to us to say those things. And trying to keep it short and simple. So what I reflect back will not be as long as what the person said. I'm really trying to get to the essence of what they're feeling and what's important to them. And yeah, it's a practice for me as well to kind of welcome it. If I say, oh, are you feeling like this? And like this thing is feeling super important to you. And they're like, no, not that, this. It's part of my practice to really welcome that that correction and not take it like, oh, I got it wrong, but more like, okay, I'm closer to understanding what's going on for the person that I'm listening to. So I'd really like to go into to having a practice with this in pairs, and I'll explain the practice right now, and then I'll just ask if there are any other questions. So in the little box, and I think we might actually have a little bit longer for this. I'm just going to increase some of the times. Yeah, cool. So when you get into your pairs, decide who's speaking first and find a stopwatch or a timer so you can keep track of time. And then the speaker will speak and the other person will just listen. And really trying to listen on the level of particularly the heart, the feelings, and the needs. And if you'd like to, you can have a look at the lists of feelings and needs that are in the slide to help you. And yeah, the person who's talking can speak about how you're doing right now, or about why you're here, what brought you to this session. And the listener, feel free to ask the person to pause. So this is not a memory test. You don't have to listen listen the whole time and then try and repeat back everything that's been said. Ask them to pause if it's too much and reflect back what you're hearing in little chunks. And then when the speaker's finished or the time's up, the listener's going to let them know they've been heard and understood by reflecting back just the feelings and the needs, and then checking if it's right. And then the speaker can add anything else they'd like to say or correct anything that the listener didn't hear. And then there's 2 minutes for the speaker to say how it was to be reflected, how that felt to you to have someone reflect back what you were saying. So when you're listening, it can be really difficult because you're like listening and trying to listen for the feelings and needs. You could also experiment with trying to just relax and really kind of sink into what is going on for this person and what's important to them. And then you'll swap over and do the same thing again. And we'll send you a message halfway through to let you know that we're halfway. Are there any clarifying questions? Anything that I didn't explain clearly about what we're going to do in pairs? Okay, cool. If you find that you have a question when you're in your breakout group, you can there's a button for you to send me and Catherine a message, and then we can pop into your breakout room and chat with you. Anything to add, Catherine, before we go into breakout rooms? Thank you. Okay, so here comes an invitation. Happy practicing. Pause recording.
Hi.
Hi.
I got a sneak flash of your, I don't know what the picture was that you've got when your camera's not on, but it was
Big picture.
I don't know. No, you had something. You had like something else come up.
Oh.
It wasn't. I
Oh, maybe my camera flashed off. Technical weirdity. Hello, welcome back. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to hear. I'd love to hear how that was for you, whether it felt like comfortable or whether there was some discomfort, whether it felt very familiar or whether it was totally new. Anything else about how that was for you to do and to be listened to. And then we're going to go for a break. So yeah, please just come off mute and share anything you'd like to share. How was that for you?
I'm happy jumping in. I think it was definitely more uncomfortable being the speaker than doing any of the listening or hearing reflections back. And I think that it was somehow more straightforward doing the listening because, like you said before we broke out into the rooms, it's kind of that idea of you got to just relax. So I kind of focused on that, and it was a bit easier than the trying to think, what am I going to actually talk about here?
Thanks, James. So I was hearing in there that you were finding a way that you could, when you were listening, sort of sink into relaxing and like tuning into the feelings and needs. Thank you.
I think I felt the opposite. I think it's easier to connect with what I'm thinking and feeling and able to share that than I find it much harder to listen to someone else and be like, what are they thinking? What do they need? I find that harder.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think just to echo what James said, actually, I think I did also feel strangely uncomfortable when I was having to share. Maybe just because it's like, I don't know, to sort of have to tell someone how you're doing is actually feels kind of difficult. especially when it's, I guess it would be one thing if you were like, oh, it's just your mate, and you kind of, I don't know, I also feel like there's certain levels of how much I'm going to share in whatever context and stuff, but yeah, so it did feel easier when listening.
Thank you, Annie.
Same for me also. I felt a bit like,
sorry, my mistake. You both came at the same time, so I'm just going to invite Katie to speak, and then Nina, I'd love to hear as well. So Katie first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a familiar kind of exercise for me, being in a co-op. Something that happens quite often, to say, oh, can I repeat this back to you to make sure I've heard you correctly, especially when you're sort of voting on something. And then, yeah, sort of thinking about risk in my job role, kind of making sure that you've heard someone correctly and it's recorded, and everyone's on the same page. So yeah, it was quite a familiar experience.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you, Nina.
yeah, it's not unfamiliar for me either, but I feel like in real life contexts like work, I tend to not do it that way. It's more of an exercise type of thing. And I found it easy to do as an exercise, although I also found when I was talking, I kept making myself nervous by thinking about how that was going to be interpreted already. But I'd like to be more comfortable doing sort of shorter, incorporating it in shorter ways, maybe, where in a real meeting you wouldn't necessarily do it in this structured and long process, but to even bring a little elements of it into real life settings.
Thank you, Nina. Yeah, thank you. It's really helpful. Cool. Jules.
Yeah, I think I found reflecting, there was one situation which I could hear what Enes was, how do I say it, Enes? Is it Enes? Enes, right, thank you. Enes. So I could hear what she was saying and feeling because I recognised the situation. So I found it was easy to reflect upon that. And then, yeah, but then I think the second thing, I think it's just takes practice, I suppose.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, definitely an ongoing practice, and learning how to hear that way, and then learning how it's comfortable for me to express it, and getting kind of quicker at expressing it, or getting to the nugget. And yeah, I was wanting to pick up on that a little bit. When facilitating a meeting, for example, if there's been a lot of discussion about something, this can be really helpful to kind of summarize what you've heard is important for people, check that you've got it right, and then go to that, everyone hearing what's important to us, or does anyone have a proposal that meets all of those needs? So it can be a really helpful way to kind of summarize in a way that really captures what's important to people. That was another thing I was going to say, but it's temporarily gone from my mind. Oh, I was loving, Anais, I was loving that you noticed what was uncomfortable for you about checking in that way. And was kind of noting that as like feedback to a facilitator. So if we're asking people to check in, there are ways that we could adjust the check-in depending on how well people know each other, or what might be comfortable or uncomfortable. And yeah, just noticing that for you, that was feedback on what's comfortable and what's not. And for me, it was feedback as well, and a way that we can adjust the tools that we're using. Catherine, would you like to add anything before we go for a break?
I'd only to reiterate the lifelongness of this practice, and yeah, the deepening of it, and following on from facilitation, then how important it is if you want to work around working with difficult conversations and mediation and working with conflict in your group, or working with other groups on that important skill. I also wanted to know, Ros, if I've got a little bit time to speak about the spectrum.
Yes, please.
Jules,
3 whole minutes.
Jules, this question that you had has got me puzzling now about how I could describe this spectrum line in a way that could both relate it to the temperature check and also distinguish it. It's a tool that I love, and it works absolutely best of all when we're in a room together and we can use it as a movement-based tool. But I want to invite you all to look at slide 16. And on the horizontal axis, at one end it says, this event, this idea that we've come up with fits with our purpose. And at the opposite end it says, doesn't fit with our purpose. So we could, in this case, move a little thingy along that spectrum. You know, this, I don't really think it fits with our purpose. I could put my name on that as well. And then other people could move their little thingies to different places too. And then there's another axis in this one. Is the event idea fun and engaging, or isn't it fun and engaging? And we can just see quite in what for me is a valuable way of looking in this sort of visual way where people are. And if people have got their names, we can ask people to get together in small groups to have conversations about where they are, or people from different ends of the spectrum could be speaking to each other, or we could invite people to respond. So I think it builds on the temperature check and is a more sort of sophisticated version of that. Let's just, I don't quite like the word sophisticated, but you get more information from the spectrum line, I think, or yeah. Does that help explain it? No. I'm excited to hear your question now. Go on.
Yeah, no, just so on Zoom, I can understand that, that translates very well. However, on Zoom, how are you getting those different corners? So I mean,
so we're on Zoom now, and we're just doing it on a slide. And if I put my name on that little thing, we would know where each person in the group. So then as a facilitator, I could invite somebody to say, you know, let us know why you're standing there. What is it about it that fits our purpose? And we hear each other. And also in a spectrum line, then I can move. Oh, I think I got what that person said. I think I'm going to move a little bit further towards their position. So that also as people are hearing each other in a discussion, they're also moving relative to each other. And that can be a sort of continuous process of seeing where the group is going without it being groupthink and, you know, having to move. Also allowing for that possibility of difference of views on this, but just to see where those are. And then we can focus a bit on where the differences are and see what might need to change about the event idea that we've got. I'm not sure that answered your question fully.
but it's just how it physically does it without a slide. It's like, so you'd go that way, that way. So yeah, that's it.
So on Zoom, you could use a slide set like we are here.
Yeah, I was
Just
with an alternative way of doing it without a slide. That's all.
I suppose you could do it on a whiteboard.
That's all right. Don't worry. That's fine.
If you had people who are on a phone who wouldn't be able to look at the slide document at the same time, and suppose like you had a number of people who are on the slide and a number of people on the call who can't, how would you do that? Would you then not use a tool like this?
Might not use it if that was a lot of people, but otherwise asking them to direct us or direct somebody to place their star, and then describing what the spectrum line is looking like, because it does get a little bit more clumsy, but I think it would be possible.
I'm really enjoying these questions, thinking about kind of how, about how to really get people the best access possible. Really liking that question, Nina. So at the beginning of the session, when I asked, is there anyone on a phone? If the answer had been yes, I think Catherine and I would be doing, we'd be doing things differently. We'd be explaining a lot more what the visuals are that we're using. We might have maybe teamed someone on the phone up with Anais so that they could kind of say what they were wanting Anais to do, and then Anais might have moved something for them. And maybe just to keep asking them, is that clear for you? So that they know that we're thinking about them and that they're not able to engage in the same way as the rest of us visually. Okay.
And is there just another quick question? Because I've done spectrum lines, but there's only ever been kind of one thing that you're sort of talking about. But how, or I guess generally, like, how are you deciding what those, what the spectrum represents, I guess, like, because I guess that totally dictates what answer you're going to get, or what seems Sorry, that's not an easy question, maybe, but
good, great. I've got a thought, Catherine, or I'm very glad for you to speak as well.
I say something maybe. So you could have this partway through a discussion. You could have heard there was a bit of a conversation about fun and excitement, and is it exciting, and does it fit our purpose or not? And then you could do a spectrum line to support you to have that discussion more. Or you could, I guess, plump for some ideas based on what the question is that's being asked as the agenda item, and just try that as the spectrum. You probably need to have a little bit of discussion or conversation having happened to know what the ends are going to be before you can set up the spectrum line, I think.
No, I don't know. I was just wondering whether you could use head and hands at the same time.
I'm loving this line, Jules, that you're just
Sorry.
Sorry.
I've got another.
No, it's brilliant that you're thinking how to translate it. It's perfect. Of course, you don't have to use a slide. It's a really good way to get the visual. But yeah, I'm sure there are loads of ways that you could, or like different ways that you could think of doing it physically on the screen as well. Or like, I mean, you can move people's pictures around now in Zoom. Like, I think it's brilliant that you run off creatively with like, how could we do this in different ways without using a slide? I think that's perfect. Yeah. I am loving the questions coming, and I'm wanting us to have a break. So we'll have more space for questions afterwards, I hope. Let's have a 10-minute break. So coming back at 3 minutes past 7, inviting you to care for yourself in the break, so to stretch and move your body if that's what's needed, and to go and get a drink and do whatever else you need to do. And we'll see you back in 10 minutes.
Thanks. See you.
Everyone. Nina and Jules, let us know when you're back in some way. There's Nina. Hey. Jules, let us know if you're back. You turn your camera on or send us a little note in the chat.
What are you grinning about, Anais?
I just like everything I think is just on my face. No, I was just sending Nina a message saying, "Oh, you look nice with your hair down," because I haven't seen it before. So now I'll just say it to everyone. There we go.
Thank you. It's just really impractical.
It's nice.
Thanks. I did have a haircut 2 weeks ago too.
Maybe we'll start just for time. What do you think, Catherine? Jules, are you there yet? No. Okay. Yeah, I'm handing over to Catherine. Oh, muted, Catherine.
Thanks. For the rest of the time that we've got together, we're going to look at and practice open loops, naming and framing, and managing contributions. I just want to say a little bit about open loops and naming and framing, then we'll have a practice session, and then we'll look at managing contributions. So Ros already mentioned open loops. It's one of those things that it's really helpful to track or to pay attention to when they're arising, along with the purpose and time and energy and needs. And I want to invite you to look at slide 6. I'll just say a little bit more about open loops. So it's something that's left hanging in the air. It could be a statement or a question or an unresolved issue, a decision that hasn't been made. It's left hanging in the air, something that's unresolved. I'm sure that in many meetings that you've been part of, there have been open loops, and that Ros and I will do a little demonstration together of what open loops could sound like in your group. So I want you to imagine that we're in a meeting, and as Ros and I speak alternately, you're hearing lots of different people put their hands up and then speak. So I'm going to start. So I'm wondering whether it'd make good sense to move our day of action to a weekend. What do you think?
Sorry, muted. Hey, I can't figure out how to see everyone who's speaking. How do I do that?
Hey, what do you mean move the day of action? I thought we'd cancelled it.
I'm really annoyed that no one except me ever wants to take notes.
What time are we finishing today?
I think we should move our day of action. I was thinking we could actually host a film screening instead of the protest we planned, and then have a weekend day, and that would be better.
I've just been thinking, can we start with a different check-in question next time? I'm getting really tired of talking about the colour of my toothbrush, and so on. So all of those statements had an open loop in them. There were some that were the thread of the conversation about the day of action, and others that were on other things that people were thinking about in relationship to the meeting. So perhaps now, if it wasn't clear before what we were talking about when we were talking about open loops, you recognize them now from, well, if you're anything like me, most of the meetings I've ever been in. So what's the impact of open loops? Perhaps you sensed it there. This sense of so many things coming and not being resolved can take up a lot of energy and cause a lot of confusion, because we're wondering, well, when is that thing going to get addressed? You know, when will we work out what time the meeting's actually ending? When will we actually be on the topic that we came together for? So I just want to share a few ideas that we have about how you might close a loop, and then we're going to do a practice where there'll be an open loops question that you can explore. So first of all, you could go straight to the open loop, and as soon as that question comes in, not taking any more hands that have come up, but actually turning towards that person and starting to address the question that's come up there, like the end time of the meeting. And maybe agree then what the end time is going to be, and that will close that loop. You could ask the person who's raised the question about the open loop what they want to do about it. So for the person who's talking about the check-in question about the toothbrush, you could ask them, do they want it to be resolved now, or is there another time when we could resolve it together? To make sure that the open loops are not lost, then you could name them as they come up. So intervening in the conversation and just saying, okay, I've heard that there's a question about this, about, I can't remember the examples now. And then you could write it down somewhere or invite a note taker to add it to the agenda for next time. You know, we need to think about more creative ways to do our check-ins. Let's add that to the agenda. You could say very clearly that we don't have time to address that issue today, and be clear with the group that you're not going to deal with it right now, that you probably then need to think, when is it going to be dealt with? So again, it could go to a future agenda, but just being clear rather than skating over the question and just taking more hands. Or it could be something that it could be very easy to just say, is there a group of people here who'd like to talk about this and bring back a proposal to the group, setting up a kind of subgroup. So I think the important thing is not to completely skip over it unconsciously and just let the hands, I think it's, and we'll come to this later, it's also about interrupting the flow. We've got this sense that if people have their hands up, we should just let each person speak one after the other. And it's much more proactive than that, as being a facilitator, to attend to what's being said and then seeing how to deal with that thing. If it's related to the conversation, then we carry on the conversation. If it's another question that's come up for somebody, what will we do with it, and making clear what to do with it. And then the energy that's held in that open loop gets closed, or at least temporarily closed. Okay. Any questions about open loops or comments on open loops?
Catherine, while people ponder, could you make me host, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. No worries about that. We're going to get a chance to practice. So I want to move on to thinking about another part of that which links with open loops and with all things. I think Ros said this was one of her favourite things, naming and framing, and it certainly is a really important part, again, of facilitation. I also just want to note that for me, having names for these things that we might already be doing in our facilitation is, I find, really helpful, because then I go, oh, open loop. You know, I get more clear with myself that this is an open loop and that there's something I could do about it if I choose to. And same with naming and framing. You may already be using naming and framing in your facilitation, but having a name for what it is, I think, supports us to do it more and to understand why it might be useful. Anyway, naming and framing. So naming, just verbally saying what's going on in the meeting in an observational or multi-partial way can be really useful. So I could be saying something about, I have a sense that there's some tension in the room, and I'm wondering how we might go forward with that. It might be then inviting people to say something about that, but just the naming of it can settle the energy, and it's, although it's not fully closing a loop, it's attending to it in some way. So there's a loop there that's open, which is tension, which hasn't been named and hasn't been addressed. So we could partially close it by naming it and then asking the question about, is it something we want to deal with right now together, or is it something that actually needs a separate meeting where we'll talk about it? So then also not only naming it, but then going on to invite suggestions for how to deal with it so that it closes the loop more fully. Another could be, just going to get my other note, around timing. So it can be really helpful to verbalize how time is going in a meeting. I know, I think I know that we're 20 minutes behind on the agenda and where we intended to be. Can be really helpful for people who are anxious, thinking, oh, there's so many agenda items to go. Has the facilitator noticed that we're so behind with this? Have they got a plan for what we're going to do about it? So then you might then have a plan for what to do about it. So I'm going to cut the conversation off now. And we're going to move on to something else. Oh, yes, perhaps that's enough examples on that. And let's say something about framing. So framing means to put it into context. So I might have named something like there's only...
Catherine, sorry, yes. Just seeing Anais has a question.
I was just wondering what you mean by multi-partial.
Ah. So I think in facilitation, there's been a lot of talk in the past, and I've used this term myself, of neutrality, the idea that a facilitator is neutral, as in not on anybody's side. Multi-partiality means on everybody's side, championing everybody's right to have their view and to bring their viewpoint forward. So supporting everybody to do that. I'm not saying I agree with either of those things, but I want to support people to be able to say what they want to say. It's particularly important when you're working where there's tension in the space or where there's conflict. Otherwise, people can sense that you're on one person's side and not on the other. So it's particularly important there, but a sense that I'm not dismissing any viewpoint. I'm trying to be champion for everybody to be able to speak in the space. Is that? Okay. So framing is linked to naming. They often go together. So I might name something and then I might want to be doing something about it. So I want to put it into a context. So if I'm saying that we've only got 20 minutes left, the framing might be around, and if we're going to get to meet the purpose of this meeting, which is the framing part, then I need to do this, or I'm going to suggest that we do this. Let me give some examples. So if we're just imagining that there's some hands up in the room, you've noticed that quite a few people haven't spoken yet, and you want to make some space for those other voices. It might mean that you're going to take people's hands out of turn. So there are some hands up, but you're going to turn and you're going to name that. I'm seeing that there are a few people have got their hands up, and I want to make it possible and easy for those who haven't spoken yet to have an opportunity to speak. So that's the decision that I'm going to make. And the framing is because I think we'll get a more robust solution if we include more perspectives and needs. So I'm given my reasoning, my framing, if you like, for why I'm making that decision. So I'm naming the situation. I've seen there are some hands up and there are some people who haven't spoken yet. I want to make space for them to speak because I think that'll make a more robust solution. So that's my framing, because I'm trying to come back to purpose to get the best decision we can from our meeting. I don't think it's so important. If you're not quite getting the distinction between naming and framing, I think that's okay. They often go together. I have to name the situation and I frame it in the context of there's not enough time. We don't have enough time to hear all of these, all of us to speak for a long time. So I'm going to frame it like we've got quite a short meeting tonight and a lot of agenda items, and I'm inviting you to be succinct with what you say this evening. Because I want us to get through as many agenda items as possible or to meet the purpose of this meeting. So I'm naming something, I'm making my suggestion for how to do things, and then I'm framing that in the context of the meeting and its purpose. Okay, I'm aware that that might be quite a lot, and I'm just wondering if, or it might be very familiar to you as well. I'm wondering if you're okay for us to go into the practice and to try out both the open loops. Some of the scenarios are about an open loop and others are about naming and framing. So we're looking at slide 8. So on the right-hand side of the slide, there are some scenarios, and you may not get through all of these in the time that we have got for the session. So you maybe want to pick ones. So my invitation is, first of all, for you to look at the scenarios and each person take a different scenario and just take a few moments to imagine that you're the person going to facilitate the meeting where that scenario is happening. And to just think for a short amount of time what you might say to name and frame that situation or to close the loop on it. And then whoever of you wants to go first then imagines that they are the facilitator and that the others, there'll be 3 of you in a group, the other 2 people are the participants, and you'll speak directly to them as though you're the facilitator. So as it's in quotation marks, saying what you would say if you were in a meeting situation to them, and then giving yourself a little bit of feedback, what you thought went well about what you said. And then if you are willing and interested in that, to get some feedback from the participants, the people who received the naming and framing. And then switch and move to another scenario and a new facilitator. And just go through, I've given some timings there, but if you get through them more quickly, then there are more scenarios that you could do. Okay.
And is pairs okay, Catherine, or would you prefer 3s?
Yeah, I want 3s actually. Yes, sorry.
3s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and let us know if you want any support when you're in your groups. Yeah, have fun.
Just coming now.
Yeah, so how was it to do that? Any thoughts on how confident you feel about trying that out, or whether it's already quite familiar to you? Just take a few, just got time for a few people to speak. Or you can write in the chat if you'd like to as well.
I thought that was really good, actually. I think it was good to actually have to say what you would say, because that's more challenging. So I thought it was a good task, but also quite tricky. We tried to do 4 and found that quite difficult. So I think we'd hoped maybe to get a bit of wisdom on that from the rest of the group. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Thanks.
And we didn't get round to all of, I mean, only 2 of us actually did the facilitator role because it was easy to get lost in the details of it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to do all of them. I just wanted there to be a little choice of scenario for you to pick up. So
yeah, not all of them. What I meant is not all 3 of us even took the facilitator.
Oh, I see.
Once.
Oh, okay, that's a shame. So I would encourage you you'll have the slide set and to practice trying out the scenarios and thinking what you might say for them afterwards.
I was just going to say, on scenario 4, did you explore the idea of like a breakout room equivalent of taking people to one side?
I think a break came up, and then I think we might have then talked to people not in the whole group scenario. Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, that's basically what happened, and then yeah, we sort of carried on role playing, but didn't quite get what we were hoping to. Probably because Nina was such an unruly participant that refused to wait until it was her turn to speak. So.
I mean, to be fair, the situation we were kind of turning it into, it can't be resolved in a quick session. You would really have to go through a mediation process that you can't be expected to do that in 3 minutes. Great facilitator.
Okay, yeah. I guess what's important here with the naming and framing is what is the first thing you say as a facilitator, to name and frame the situation. And then what next? Actually, we'll talk more about that next week, if any of you are coming next week, about how you might handle that if it arises in a meeting. And yeah, but you are more enthusiastic about the scenarios than I had anticipated, which is great.
So what would you say in terms of naming and framing before, do you think?
There could be different situations, but I would name that there's some tension in the room. I would name actually maybe something about time if there was a time issue. I would invite, well, yeah, we've got a great slide where you can think about different ways of how you might respond and then how you might frame it. Like the question might come up, is this tension that's here about the purpose of this meeting? And therefore we may need to address the tension here in this space right now because it relates to the purpose of the meeting. Is it some other kind of tension that we could invite? Is it possible to take this tension outside of the room? Could we, to think, could we continue with the meeting, knowing that the tension is going to be addressed outside of the meeting? So the naming and framing part, the initial part, is just to name that there is a tension, and then to frame what you might do about it in terms of the meeting.
Is it? I'm sorry.
Sorry, go for it, Jules.
Oh, sorry. Is it? I wasn't watching. Is it ever appropriate to say, "Can you take this? Shall we take this to a breakout room?" Or is that not appropriate at all?
Do you mean a breakout room while the meeting's happening?
I think that was that your question, James? Yeah. Well, yeah. I think
it might be appropriate. Something to think about is whether you as a facilitator, or who might go to the breakout room with those people to at least support a conversation to happen. Do you have the capacity in the space to do that? So there's a lot of things to think about there. Is it something that we could actually do during this meeting? Would they then miss something in the meeting that they could actually be contributors to if the tension was named and a suggestion was made about how it might be dealt with outside of the meeting? Would that be enough to bring the tension to a place where people could continue together? So there's a lot of different possibilities that are linked to actually being in the situation, but I think it's
would then that not also then create tension within the group that's left? Then the people came out of the breakout room not knowing what they've been speaking, so you're creating more tension, aren't you, in effect?
yeah.
Jules, sorry, Catherine. I think I was wanting to say that this is the bit for me that I'm loving so much about the naming and framing bit that feels so radical, is naming what's happening and saying why you're making the choice that you're making is just such a change in dynamic to what I would tend to do, what I've learned to do, which is to slightly skate over what's happening and kind of half pretend that there's no conflict and try and put it in a breakout room, and that's been my instinct. And to say there's tension in the room, I know this might be difficult for the people feeling the tension. It might be uncomfortable for other people. I'm recognizing that this is happening. And then according to the purpose of the meeting, frame your decision, whether that's a breakout room or some other way. Explain why you're making the decision that you're making according to the purpose. Just shifts the whole thing. And maybe even framing it like, we've got tension, it happens, we're humans, we're working together, it's totally normal. It's feedback to us, it's beautiful feedback, and we can treat it as such. You can reframe the whole conflict and just settle the open loop by saying that it's going on. And that can make a big difference to then what you choose to do afterwards. And I've put in the slide that Catherine was referring to. It's slide 9.
Okay. And that really does work as well. to name something just settles everybody, both the people who are in conflict and those who are not.
Yeah, I think that was very helpful. Thank you, Rose.
Okay, where do we move on? How can we move on? Okay, we just need to just look at time. Just spend 10 minutes on this and then.
Yeah, maybe a little under that, 8 minutes or something. Yeah.
So the other thing that we were planning to look at today is managing contributions. So first of all, let's just think about why we might want to do that. And in terms of managing contributions, thinking about people that we might want to interrupt and people that we might want to encourage to speak more. Why might we want to do that in a meeting? Anybody just want to suggest why we might do that?
Because typically the loudest voices in the room get heard and maybe take a step forwards quicker than others.
Yeah, so if we're thinking about our purpose, we get a better decision if we get to hear more voices, more people got to contribute what they need from the decision, and we get a better quality of decision if more voices are heard. So inviting people to stop speaking so that we can create space for other people to speak. So, and it's linked, of course, with managing the dynamics, the power dynamics, the reasons why some people find it easier to speak in a meeting and why other people find it less easy to speak or to share their views as well. So how might we do that? And we changed the slide number now. Is it to slide 10? We go to slide 10. And I just want to invite you to shout out any ideas that you have for how we might interrupt people, how we might do that, what you might need to bear in mind in order to do that skillfully, and ideas for perhaps what you might say in order to interrupt somebody. For me, this is quite a scary thing when somebody is speaking and I want to stop them speaking because we're running out of time, because I know there are 10 other people in the room who haven't said anything yet and this person has spoken a number of times. There are lots of reasons and I find it scary to do that. But what can help us? Perhaps you do too, to interrupt somebody.
I'm seeing everyone nodding in unison, or like almost everyone, like, mm-hmm.
So how might we do that? What might help us to do that in a way that is skillful, doesn't hurt that person, and also gets the result that we want?
It's kind of a couple of phrases I might start what I'm going to say with before moving them on. Maybe something like, if it's okay, I'm just going to jump in here. or thanking them for what they've said so far, but that if it's okay to move on. So sort of checking in with them, I suppose.
Yeah. So thanking them, like acknowledging them, sort of, yeah, acknowledging that they've had something useful to say, and you need to move on. What could you add to that would support that? In thinking about naming and framing. So you've named something. How could you frame why you want to move on? What could you say? That could be you, Katie, or I could be asking anybody. If you would like to respond, that would be great.
Yeah, just to acknowledge, to frame it in the context of time and the purpose of why we're here.
Absolutely, yeah. The amount of time that we've got left and the number of people who already haven't spoken yet, and what the purpose is, and the purpose of getting as many ideas on the table, as much information out there to help us make a good decision. Yeah, thank you.
I guess you could also add to be like, we've heard quite a lot from you. I'd like to hear what other people think, and inviting other people to chip in their ideas, while also like acknowledging to that person that they're definitely being heard, and we've heard lots from them already, and we've like definitely acknowledged what they've said as well.
How would you say that that we've heard lots from them? How do you think you would actually say that if you were speaking to them? I'm wondering if I heard that it might not sit very well with me. I'm just wondering how you might say it that would support them to not feel hurt and not to shut up for the rest of the meeting, because it may be that they've good things to say.
Maybe there's some way of like recognizing that they've contributed quite a lot. There's a more positive way of framing it. It's good to have heard all these different things from you, but context specific. It'd be really great to hear what the rest of the room has to say to respond to that.
Yeah, that could be one way, couldn't it? Yeah, to acknowledge what's been said and that they've said some useful, helpful things, and there are others to hear from as well.
Maybe to build on that as well, to use the word turn. So somebody asked to have a turn, maybe. So it kind of feels like they can come back again later if they want to.
And how can,
2-minute warning, Catherine.
Thanks.
Can you do one of those? Just give them a little time warning.
That's it. Yeah, you could do that at the beginning, couldn't you? So
Yeah.
say,
That's a very polite way.
I'll just let you know, and here's the signal or the sound, the bell or whatever it is that I'm going to ring. You could also frame the beginning of the meeting with time is tight and I want to make sure that as many people as possible get to speak, and I may interrupt you. And my reasoning is that I want other people to speak. I think the framing part is important there. Not only am I wanting to stop this person, but why? Why am I wanting to stop them? And thinking about that as something for the benefit of the whole group. And having that person come along with you in understanding what the benefit for the whole group is of that. And what about, just very briefly, turning to when you might want to support people who haven't spoken to speak? How might you do that?
I think just to say that sometimes I've tried to do that and I've asked people what they think, and then I've had the impression that actually they didn't always want to be put on. I felt like I put them on the spot and they were suddenly forced to come up with an opinion and they didn't feel comfortable. So I just wondered about that. But
so how might you do that without putting them on the spot? What do you think you might say?
I suppose I could ask them just if there was anything I could notice that they hadn't sort of said anything yet on this topic. Was there anything they wanted to say? As opposed to saying, what do you think about it?
You think, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like an invitation, but not like a, yeah, so it's optional in a way, I suppose.
And perhaps you can add, and it's okay if there isn't anything right now, let me know when there is, or yeah.
Thank you.
There's also a way to do that that's more open and not just to an individual and not naming, just saying, you know, I've noticed there are some people who haven't spoken yet. I'm not going to take any more hands. I'm just going to give a bit of space for anyone who hasn't spoken yet to speak. So I'm not pointing at a particular person. I'm giving that possibility, that bit of space. Some people find it quite difficult to be in the hands up thing. Feels a bit competitive. Yeah.
And I'm thinking also maybe to use the statements that the people who have spoken a lot and do temperature checks on them to at least get an idea whether the people who aren't speaking what they agree with or what they feel like, so that even the ones who, when asked, don't have anything to say, to get an idea.
Great, yeah, thank you.
And make them feel like their opinion is valued.
Yeah. Of course, that's something we can say at the beginning as well. But we can name that. Yeah. I think I need to stop. Is that right?
Thank you, super rich.
We have an exercise on the next slide. So if any of you feel that you'd like to have a go at that, you need somebody to do it with. But yeah, to practice interrupting someone can be really valuable, I think.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you all. We're going to move to closing. Oh, I've got another thought about the radicalness of interrupting, but I'm not going to say it because we have to finish. So I would love to very briefly point you in the direction of slide 16, where you can find links to other resources. So there's lots of resources in those folders. So you can read about the stuff we've been talking about, and there's more practices in there as well, and other things. And on slide 12 and 13, I'm inviting you to just write take one of those first boxes that say one takeaway, and just write in something that's really standing out to you that you're taking away from this session, something that feels valuable or juicy, that's really struck you as like, that's a takeaway for me. And just write a sentence about that in one of those first boxes.
Sorry, which slide is that on?
Oh, thank you. It's slide 12, 13, 14. We won't need them all. 12 or 13, yeah. Just in that first box, one takeaway. See them starting to come. And if you haven't already started writing on slide 12, you'll need to move to slide 13 and pick another box. So everybody's writing in a separate box. So just another 30 seconds with this, because I'm wanting us to close because we're at time. Great, thank you for these, they're really helpful. Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm going to pause this there for time. I invite you, if you can, sort of straight after this session, and if not really soon, to just follow the line in that slide through. So think about your one takeaway and think about one concrete next step that might help you practice that or embed that in your facilitation practice. And really importantly, the third one, how might you get support with that? Maybe that's getting yourself a buddy from within your group who you could practice it with, or who you could get feedback from, or there might be some other way that you can ask for support or give yourself support to practice. I think it's super important. It can be a lonely job being a facilitator. And also, if you're willing, I'm gonna ask us to close now, but we would really love to hear your feedback. And I'm sorry we've run slightly over. So after we've closed, if you do have a couple of minutes to go to slide 15 and tell us one thing per post-it that could have been better about this session. And you don't need to phrase that in any way for us. You can just tell us straight up what you would have liked to have been better, what could have been better. But for now, because we're already 1 minute over, I would love to do a very quick checkout. So I'd love to hear just 2 words for where you're at now. And I will start, and then I'm going to just say who's coming next. And if you don't want to check out, that's totally fine. You can just pass. So I'll start, and then Catherine will go, and then I'll ask Anais to go. Heart-warmed and rushed. And then Anais.
Is it me?
Yes, please.
Hungry. And yeah, lots of energy.
Thank you. Anais, and then Ines.
Tired, but thankful.
Thank you. Ines, and then James.
Interesting reflections.
Thank you. James, and then Jules.
Ready to experiment.
Thank you. Jules, and then Katie. And you're muted, Jules, so we're not hearing you.
Hungry, I'm thinking and hungry.
Thank you. Katie, and then Nina.
I feel knackered and also lots of food for thought.
Thank you. Nina.
And yeah, also thankful and more relaxed than when we started.
Thank you all. Thank you for your input. If you have time to stay and do a slide of feedback for us, we'd love that. And otherwise, rest well and eat well. Catherine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you. It feels like it was quite rushed, and we're on the start of a journey. So yeah, I hope you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
might just say, just quickly. Sorry. Thanks both. I don't know about it, but I thought that was a really, really great session, and it was really nice to see how you guys did it online, having done it in person last year. I thought it was good. I'm just going to share a link with our other sessions. So Ros and Catherine are doing another session next Thursday. That's sort of like another, I guess, maybe level 2 facilitation. I don't know. So yeah, do have a look. I don't want to compete with your feedback. We've got a feedback form, but I won't share it now because I want people to do the other thing. But I'll out tomorrow, and I would ask that you do please complete the feedback form because it's really, really important. All right. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks, Anais.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.
Hey.
Oh yeah.
It was good though. It was really good. you saw it coming when you said, "Oh,